A few months ago, I recorded a guitar chord progression and made it public domain and invited people to take the recording and make their own music with it, then send it back to me, and I would make a video showcasing some of the different approaches people took. So here, first of all, is the original guitar chord progression sample. Some people took that whole sample as is and then reorchestrated it for different styles. In this example from Terpsy Q, we hear the entire public domain progression rendered as a prog black metal epic. In these next two examples by Timmy Holiday and Dumb and Bass, we get a totally different approach where instead of sampling the whole thing or working with the whole thing, they just took the very last chord I played, that little major 7 chord at the end, and used it to make a very nice, beautiful, emotional soundscape. In the next two submissions by Ben Smith and Nick Kruger, you can hear what happens if you take the original vibe of the sample and just accentuate it emotionally, add a few more elements that are very masterfully placed to create a whole different sense of atmosphere and a complete world. These next three examples by Reverend Judas Slees, Felix, and Andres J. Castillo Esquivel are great examples of what happens when you apply vocals to the original sample. But what's really fascinating about this is that if you attach these three different submissions to each other, you can actually get a really cohesive song form just from that. Check them out, side by side.
Stars shine down right through my bones, real old photons. This is it, Jake can sing for my toenails.
These next three spicy puppies by Electronic Octopus, Joe Fatum, and JoJo Music show what happens when you chop up the sample and make electronic music that's groovy and glitchy.
I prefer audio files, screen capture easily in the video.
Hello, how's it going? Welcome to another Papa Relanu
Screen capture I prefer.
These next three examples by Jeremy Carrier, Timothy Mills, and John Kosh are built around the idea of humans performing the main instrument and are centered around a pretty live feel. In this last example by Jackson Sweeney, we see what happens if you take the basic general harmonic ideas from the original public domain progression and expand them out into a 9.5-minute epic piano solo that is not really designed to be performed by a person in real life, but rather sits super well just within MuseScore. It sounds robotic, it sounds tinny, and it's using those sounds to what I think is a very satisfying, effective degree. Kind of in the spirit of Black MIDI, where it's not meant to be performed, and it is meant to sound like a exploitation of notation software or whatever. This piece, I think, is really satisfying and crunchy. Here's a little excerpt. There were a ton of amazing pieces, and this whole experiment was not about picking winners or picking who's best, but it was just about showing a broad variety of approaches. So to everybody who submitted something, I'm extremely grateful and excited that you were able to finish things on a short deadline and get them in, and there was just so much beautiful stuff. So I hope people are encouraged by this to keep writing and experimenting and exploring, and that it was a meaningful experience. My band Bent Knee is going on tour with Thank You Scientists for the next 3 weeks. Hope to catch you out there, and thanks for all the support with the new album, Jelly Mound.
When I see you tucked away